Hey everyone, and welcome to a quick video covering the application of wood stain. I'm going to be aiming for a lighter color here, so I'll be utilizing a slightly modified version of the flood and wipe method. As always, I'll have all of the products I'm using linked in the description below. So this is actually a tabletop to a coffee table that I'm making, and I've simply just used edge glued pine, which I cut it up to how I needed it and ended up gluing it back together, and then routed a chamfer bit on the sides. The one thing that you should note about staining pine, and I always do recommend that if you're starting out with stains, you should just use pine. Pine is great to stain, however, you need to understand the properties of how pine absorbs the stain. Pine absorbs stain very uneven and it can turn out blotchy. It's not necessarily simply because it's a softwood, but because it has areas of more and less porosity and it absorbs stain very unevenly. So you want to use a pre-stain conditioner when you stain pine. And what this does is it absorbs into a lot of the porous areas of pine and helps the stain go on more evenly. You really just want to think of it as like a primer to your paint, and it's really fairly straightforward to use, but it's almost essential for a nice consistent color if you're staining pine. The one thing to note is I'm using a oil-based pre-stain conditioner with an oil-based stain, and you just want to make sure that they're both oil-based or they're both water-based. So I'm just going to jump right into it, but first I'm going to take Bane inside because the fumes can get a little overwhelming, and then I'm actually going to set my mic down and switch to voiceover because I don't want to spend an hour editing out the sound of me breathing. I still haven't figured out how to reduce that yet. Come on, let's go, bud. So of course, to start out, we'll need to prepare the surface. So we'll start by sanding at 120 grit, and then we'll move to 220 grit. Set your speed to low. I have mine on 2 out of 5. I'm just letting the sander do the work, moving it back and forth along the grain of the wood without putting too much pressure down on the wood itself. After that, I always like to take a cloth rag and dampen it with mineral spirits and wipe the wood down. I find that helps a lot with getting any of the remaining dust off the surface and making sure that it's completely cleaned. Next, we'll get the pre-stain conditioner all mixed up, and then I'm going to be using a cloth to saturate the surface with the pre-stain conditioner. Now, I'm not putting this on terribly thin, but also not flooding it too thick. I want to make sure that the surface is covered evenly, and if there are any dry spots, I'm going to go over it again and put a little more on there. If you do put too much on there, you want to come back after about 15 minutes and wipe this down. Again, this is really essential for staining a softwood like pine. It makes a night and day difference between the evenness of the stain and how it turns out. And for the stain, you want to give it a good stir. And for this, I'm just looking for a lighter color. I'm not really looking to fully flood the surface. I'm honestly just trying to trick people into thinking that it's something other than pine, and that's all I really care about. But I don't want to change the color terribly much. And so I'm using an applicator pad here. However, you can use a brush, a cloth rag, a roller. A lot of people like to just use lint-free cloth rags. I think that's the most popular thing. I usually do too. I just had an applicator pad laying around, so I figured I would use it for this video. And as you can see, I'm using a fairly good amount to get on the surface, and I'm kind of rubbing it in a circular motion. And I'm just going over the entire surface and making sure it's fully saturated and there's no dry spots or any spots that will be missing stain. Usually you want to wait 5 to 15 minutes before you wipe the stain off. I waited about 2 minutes for this because I wanted the color to be as light as possible. But then basically you're just going to take a lint-free cloth rag and just start wiping the excess stain off of the wood. Again, these fumes can be quite overwhelming. You can get a headache pretty quickly if you're not careful. I probably should have had my garage door open on this, however, it was really cold out and I didn't want to have to put any more layers on. I do have a P100 respirator on that's rated for organic vapor. However, I struggled to get a seal and spent the rest of the evening with quite the headache. And that's really all there is to it. Just keep wiping until you get it nice and cleaned up. And there's your final product. This turned out pretty good. I think with any pine, it's hard to get perfect, but it still looks fairly good. So thanks for watching. I hope this video helped. Please comment below if you have any suggestions or any tips for staining that you know, or if I skipped over anything that might be helpful, please let me know. Hope to see you on the next one.